Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann. I've got a slightly different recording setup here. You might notice I'm trying to do this through StreamYard. I want to make sure that I can add an image of the cover of this book because I read it on Kindle and I want to gush about it. So we'll see how this goes. Let me know down below if there's anything truly wrong with volume or recording quality. But anyway, I want to gush a little bit about Antihero Blues by Christopher Lee Rippee, which I just read in the last couple of weeks. And this is a new release. It came out on August 16th, 2024. I'm never sure exactly what all the different terms are in the publishing industry, but this was released by a small publisher, I think, called Balance of Seven. So when I say new release, we're not talking about like, big advertised sort of thing. This is a debut novel released on sort of a small scale. And I absolutely loved it. So this was hands down a 5-star read for me. On Goodreads, there's a few other reviews. It's up to 13 and they've all been 5-star. So people are loving this. Yeah, so let's talk about the book a little bit. So, Antihero Blues, we follow a young man, Brandon Carter, who's in his 20s. He is a physics grad student, and he's involved in an experiment where they're basically trying to connect through the multiverse to like other versions of Earth or to other sort of streams in the multiverse. And they're kind of doing a proof of concept. They want to just be able to exchange just like a little bit of data, like a little signal or something. They're not trying to open a portal or anything like that. Brandon Carter is a physics prodigy. So as a grad student, he's on this project. He does come from sort of a rough background. So in the world, the version of Earth that this book takes place in, superheroes and supervillains sort of run the show. And there's also some really cool, like I mentioned, multidimensional, multiversal stuff. Aliens are around, so there's just all this stuff. And so Earth is sort of constantly under attack by other entities that sort of come in. And then we've got teams of superheroes that take on anything that's attacking Earth. And then we've got sort of a like gradation among the superheroes in terms of their power. So at the very, very top, there's the group called Vanguard, which have huge amounts of funding. They're big, powerful superhero types, all the way down to sort of mimicking Hollywood, right? We've got like the B list, the C list, down to like the D list superheroes that barely have any powers at all, or have a little bit of enhanced technology or something. So they're the D list. So part of Brandon Carter's rough background is that his father was killed by sort of one of these lower tier superheroes a long time ago when he was a child. And so then he and his mom had sort of a rough time as he was growing up. They didn't have a place to live for periods of time, but he's very close with his mom and very close with one friend, V, throughout his entire life, through all those troubled periods. And now when it seems like he has his life together. So his genius for physics is what's really sort of giving him an opportunity and giving him sort of a way out of that tougher time. So he's part of this crack research team that's funded by Vanguard, the guy behind Vanguard. So huge amounts of funding. They're trying to build this machine, right? So the book opens where they're doing a test run just to see if it works. Like I said, just to pass a little bit of like data between two multiverse streams, right? And something goes wrong during the test. It seems like there's an error in the code. And the plot of the book sort of unspools from there. And it's funny because in some ways the book is incredibly predictable. Like there's a lot of superhero media out there now. And it really follows like some of those steps that you would expect. So of course the technological test goes wrong, right? Of course there's a suspicious error, right? That may not truly be an error after all. And so that all sort of unfolds. And of course we've got our hero, who's also kind of an anti-hero, doesn't want to be a hero, sort of fights for a lot of the book. And for most of the book, he's really just trying to keep his family safe. He's trying to keep his mom safe, and he's trying to keep V, that best friend who's been with him for most of his life. He's just trying to keep his people safe. So it's just absolutely wonderful. And even though everything that happens is sort of expected, but I still kept feeling surprised because the storytelling was so good. And so you're in Brandon's point of view pretty much for the entire book. And so Brandon is constantly surprised, and Brandon is undergoing like so much trauma in this world of superheroes and supervillains, and so much disappointment and so much like sort of personal upheaval. And so the writing is so good that, at least for me, I was so with Brandon that even though the like plot points and the things that were happening like all fit within the trope of superhero stories, it was surprising because it was happening to Brandon. So I really liked that, and like major kudos to the author for really pulling that off, because I think these days it's kind of hard to surprise people in superhero stories. So anyway, okay, I want to back up again and just talk a little bit more about this world, because it's not a straightforward superhero story. So in this book, the superheroes, probably some of them are truly good and truly heroic, but most of them, especially the really powerful ones, it turns out are much in the vein of like the Amazon series, The Boys, or Brandon Sanderson's series. I don't remember the name of the series, but like Steelheart, that book. The superheroes are not truly superheroes. They are selfish people. They are drunk on power. And they're putting on a show. And that goes from like the A-list is definitely that way, down through the ranks. Of course, there are plenty of people and aliens and other entities that are that way as well. So that's where we're at in the 21st century, right? Like, I think for the most part, we like those darker takes on superheroes. Like, what would it really be like if someone truly had sort of unlimited power, both in terms of superhero powers, but then was getting like the economic power and the support of the public, right, for supposedly being a superhero? And like, what does that do to people, and who are the types of people that are most likely to end up in that position, right? And they're not going to be saints. I mean, that's human nature. And so this book is definitely in that vein of superhero stories, which personally I really like, because I like that sort of exploration about what would real people actually be like in these situations. Because a true superhero is going to be incredibly, incredibly rare. So I'm being very vague because I don't want to give anything away, because this book was so good and it all like kind of builds and you need to experience it with Brandon. But hopefully this is a great taste. We get some really unique powers in this book, so things that I've certainly never seen in other superhero media. Not that I've consumed everything by any means. And then I also really like the multi-dimensional aspects and the sort of like galaxy spanning, universe spanning aspects. So one of the pieces in the history of this world that starts to matter a lot for the plot as we go along is that there was an alien race, the Rippee, that I'm losing track of the timeline, maybe about 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, something like that, before the timeline of this book, came to Earth and tried to either like destroy the Earth or take over the Earth. And so all the superheroes and some supervillains banded together to defeat this alien menace, right? But of course, with an alien menace, we get exposed to new, extremely powerful technology. And one of the major undercurrents of this book, sort of thematically, but also driving the plot along, is what do different people on Earth do with some of this technology that was left behind by that invading alien force. And so that really kind of drives us along. Some of that technology, a compound called voidrium that the Rippee use to power their space travel and everything, that's at the heart of Brandon's experiment, trying to bridge streams in the multiverse. And so when the experiment goes wrong, a key part is that they kind of lose control of the voidrium, and the voidrium is doing things that people don't expect. And that affects Brandon, and that affects the rest of the plot line of the story, because we've got small amounts of this alien technology, alien compound that people are pretty desperate to have for various reasons. So you get that. So this is a very disjointed comments on this book, but if anybody who's interested in superheroes, anybody who's especially interested in sort of the darker twist that we have in recent decades of sort of really understanding how very few people would actually be superheroes when given unlimited power. If you're interested in any of those things, like, you should definitely read this book. It was just so it was so well written. The characters were great. It was just a really wonderful story. I hope that it's going to be followed up with a sequel. I haven't heard anything about it or seen anything about it. I also should have mentioned at the very beginning, I do not know this author personally, but a very dear friend of mine knows this author. And so that's how I heard about this book coming out. But yeah, never met Christopher Lee Rippee. We had one brief exchange in messages, but I might follow up and just ask, is there any chance of a sequel? Because there's certainly room for one, and it would be very exciting. So anyway, that's my gush comments on Antihero Blues. I think everyone should read this book who loves kind of superhero adventure, action-packed, sort of dark stories. It was an absolutely excellent read. So I will stop there, but I hope somebody picks up this book and let me know in the comments down below what you think if you do pick it up. Thanks. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.